Welcome to the League of Visionaries Podcast by Yazzie Media. The League of Visionaries Podcast is your place to meet visionaries, professionals, entrepreneurs, and other thought leaders with a visionary message to share. This podcast is for you if you too are a visionary driven by a deeper purpose in your work, your play, and your investments. I'm your host, Marie-Therese Leroux, the media strategist with soul and founder and owner of Yazzie Media Virtual Media House. Connect with this League of Visionaries as we explore the power of purpose and how to bring it to the world through your message. You'll find the League of Visionaries podcast on all the best podcasting platforms, and you can subscribe on your favorite. And remember to follow Yazzie Media on LinkedIn to stay up to date with your visionary message.
Do you think of yourself as a leader? After this episode, you will. In this very first episode of the League of Visionaries podcast, Hatton, international keynote speaker and creator of the Totally Morpheus leadership development programs, talks about his visionary message: conscious leadership. Our very first ever guest on this podcast, Hatton, is a mentor and mage who has awoken many to the importance of leadership for each and every one of us. Yes, even those who don't think of themselves as leaders. In this episode, some of the topics we explore are conscious leadership. What is it? Authenticity as a leader. Why true leadership begins with self. What leadership is really about. Hint, it's not a position or power. Raising up leaders, and leadership in unexpected places, among many others. Whether you lead a nation, an organization, a community, a family, or just yourself, this is your opportunity to be inspired by Ian's visionary message of conscious leadership and get Morpheus.
Ian, welcome to this very, very first episode of the Yazzie Media League of Visionaries podcast. Thank you for being our very first guest and welcome.
That is just so exciting. I love being the first guest on the League of Visionaries podcast.
So do let us know who you are and what you do.
So my name is Ian Hatton, and I'm also known as Morpheus, and I am a conscious leadership expert, the creator of various conscious leadership programs, and a keynote speaker.
Conscious leadership. There is so much that we hear about leadership, and we also hear a lot about consciousness. They don't often get mentioned in the same sentence. What is your personal definition of conscious leadership?
So it is actually very interesting what you're saying about them not often being in the same sentence, because this is not the woo-woo version of leadership. This is real leadership. It's rubber hits the road leadership. It's about increasing people's engagement, increasing productivity, increasing the delivery. It's working with people in a way that recognizes their full humanity. And that is one of the big keys. So a conscious leader is a leader who is conscious of themselves, of their people. They're conscious of all of their own faculties. They're conscious of all their people's faculties. They don't make assumptions about people's needs, or they explore, and they're constantly exploring and curious about what drives people. What genius do they bring? What is it that actually turns them on? What is it that is their best delivery that they can give? But they're very aware that great leadership starts within, and that is where the consciousness starts.
So if I understand correctly, you're saying that conscious leadership is really about leading with an awareness of the people that we lead, of everything that they bring, of everything that is possible for them together, but also understanding this because we begin with ourselves.
Yeah, exactly that. You know, the idea of leadership is a certain set of behaviors or things that I do to people is very outdated, very antiquated. People are looking for authenticity. They're looking for reality. And in fact, probably the precursor to the name conscious leadership was authentic leadership. It's leaders who are aware of themselves. They are engaged with their own emotions, their own physicality, their own bodies, their own intuitions, and of course their own minds, and they bring it all together. And that journey that they go with themselves allows them to be in touch with their people as well, because it's very difficult to bring something to others that you haven't first nurtured in yourself.
That's really interesting. A lot of the people in the world today who really should be leaders are so put off by the idea because of that idea of power and control. And I hope that as we continue, we can dig a little bit deeper into some of the myths surrounding leadership. But before we go there, I want to ask you, how did you come to this idea of conscious leadership? Something tells me that it must be the result of a journey.
Well, yes, I was involved in the corporate world. I worked in the IT sector for some 19 plus years, starting in mainframe computer operations and ending in heading up a marketing function at Microsoft. And in the process, sort of was exposed to all sorts of terrible leadership and fairly good leadership. And the problem was that some of the bad leadership I saw was my own. And I thought, well, I can see how it should be done. This authentic leadership, I'd like to take that message to the world. And if I'm going to take that message to the world, this is how I can do it. I can bring everything that I've learned in 20 years in the corporate space. And I can then, I did a master's degree in organizational leadership. And now I know how to save the world. I know how to fix leadership. Well, of course, you know how that's going to go.
All you need is a cape, right?
Exactly. And so over time, what I became very aware of is my own failures that continued. And one of the things that I often talk about is that in my master's degree, there wasn't a section on self-leadership. And I, in a way, was relieved, because I thought, well, self-leadership is self-control, and therefore I know I struggle a bit with self-control, so therefore I shouldn't go there. I just want to learn these techniques and I want to apply them to people. And of course, then the crisis happens. So some 9 years later, I find myself going through a divorce, leaving my community, buying myself out of my business or selling my business, and my whole world came down on me. And this was the time to look in the mirror and then to discover that this is the inner journey that's actually required. The journey of discovering myself, making myself my number one job every day. And then that was the real awakening. And immediately it had an impact. And this puzzled me, because without changing techniques, I discovered I was having a bigger impact on my clients, simply because I had begun the inner journey of self-leadership. And I discovered the fallacy in my thinking. And the fallacy was simply this, that if self-leadership was self-control, then leadership is control. And I don't believe that. I don't believe that leadership is control. Leadership is inspiring. Leadership is influencing. Leadership is creating environments where people connect with their own motivation. Therefore, leadership is listening. And then I thought, well, then maybe self-leadership is listening. And if I listen to myself, I will then learn and be able to lead myself. And that was where the journey then took me. And that was when I discovered my influence was increasing in a way that correlated with my inner journey of discovering and connecting with myself, discovering my own emotions, knowing how to work with them. And this whole issue of leading self is not self-control. Leading self is influencing self. And that changed everything.
And you have almost a mantra for this in your conscious leadership community, don't you?
Yes, it's that I am my number one job every day. And this is really my number one job today is me is a mantra, but it sounds a bit selfish, but it's not saying my only job is me. It's just saying my inner journey is what is my outer influence. And if I can't connect with who I really am, then all sorts of things are going to blur and interfere with my message as a leader.
It's really interesting that the way that you experienced this, it was as if by making yourself your number one job, suddenly your impact as a leader was stronger and bigger and more profound without your having changed any techniques. And that sounds really, really exciting, because a lot of the leadership dogma almost that is out there encourages people to change, to get better, and to improve, and to learn this technique and that technique. And you're actually saying it's not about a technique, it's about your connection with yourself that allows you to have a stronger connection with people. Is that right?
Exactly that. Exactly that. So conscious leadership is consciousness of self that leads to consciousness of others.
That is profound, and I think that touches on the myths, the leadership myths. And definitely, I think there are a lot of people who would say, I'm not a leader, and I don't want to be a leader because I don't want to be controlling people, who will be very interested in what you have to say there, because the people who can change the world right now, I believe, are probably the ones who don't want to be out there controlling people, telling people what to do. They're the ones who want to help others achieve their own purpose, do their own work in the world, achieve their own greatness.
Well, exactly. And I think the whole fallacy is built on this idea that leadership is a position. And reality is that leadership is influence. You could have somebody without a position who's very, very influential. And of course, one of my favorite examples is Morpheus in the Matrix movies. Because Morpheus in the Matrix movies he's not the overall political leader. He's not the overall military leader. He is a military leader, but he has a small team. And yet his influence is profound in that it influences the entire community. And this is because there is a self-belief, an inner work that happens that sees things at a different level, that sees potential. Morpheus is not the hero, is the one who raises up the hero. And this is really what conscious leadership is about. It's not putting yourself in the center, it's actually putting yourself in the position to create various leaders, to build various people of influence, and that can shift things. There's a wonderful saying that give me a handful of people and I can change the world. And this is really what it's about. It's not about you have to be the most powerful positional leader in the world, a president of a country or the president of a global organization. It can be that you are influencing wherever you are. And we all are aware of the problems of the current state of leadership. But, right down to, if you're a parent, you're a leader. You're influencing, you're responsible for creating something. And I just wish everybody would step up and own that actually they have a leadership role, no matter what their role is. And they can then take that ownership, that sense of ownership, which is a massive thing for conscious leaders. In some ways, I say the opposite of conscious leadership is a victim mindset. And we really do want to try and get that sort of idea that I have something to own and to bring to the world, irrespective of the position I hold.
That is pretty powerful, because it also says that by one person being a leader, it's not taking leadership away. It's not a lot of this mentality. I think about my history with leadership and classrooms. We had class captains or prefects in school, and then you go into the workplace and it's managers and senior managers and presidents and all these things. And we know only one person can get that job. But with conscious leadership, you're saying that we all are actually leaders, and in a conscious leadership team, that actually having that leadership within everybody becomes an asset. Would you like to talk to us about that?
Let me give you an example of a very large team. So I led a team once where, and my position at the time, I had no direct reports at all. I was not a manager of people. I had no direct reports. My leadership position was a fairly senior one, but it was without direct reports. But I was responsible for a team that mobilized about 400 or 500 people on one day for a massive event across 3 different cities. And I had to motivate all those people. I had to bring it all together. And it involved bringing a core team together and working with them. None of these core team members reported to me. So it was a matter of me needing to inspire and influence this group of about 20 people, who in turn influenced the rest, that mobilized this event of over 500 people who were actively participating on the day. But I built the team and inspired the team, and we had incredible team meetings. Everybody bought in, everybody was influenced. And to me, my leadership has always been more successful when I'm not relying on a position, where it is my job to influence people without having the authority for them to tell them what to do. So there was no control. And yet it gave me a bigger span of influence than anything I've ever done before or since.
That's incredible. And I'd love to hear more about how did you do it? I don't know if we have enough time today for that whole process, but this thing about not a leader without a title, because we easily get hung up on that thing of the title. I'm not a boss. And also, what is my authority and who am I to tell others what to do? You're saying it's not about telling others what to do. It's about calling something out in them. And maybe you'd like to tell us more about that. And also what do you work with then if you don't have a title to fall back on? And also many people who have a title to fall back on only get, the I hate my boss treatment.
So I think what's really interesting there is this whole idea that if I'm going to try and influence somebody, and there's something about a team context for doing it ideally. And in a team context, the critical thing is, do we have a common purpose? And if I come to the team and I say, okay, team, this is our purpose, that actually doesn't give everybody the buy-in. Whereas if we sit together and we say, what is our purpose? Why do we need this team? What is it all about? And people can start to bring what they need, and so they start to see, oh, but hang on, this team is going to help me to achieve these other goals. And the team is the place, the platform where I can achieve all sorts of things that are really important to me. But I can even influence exactly how that team is going to be structured, exactly how we're going to buy into this common purpose. And so we want to, as conscious leaders, build teams where there is a buy-in, because ultimate levels of motivation come from the inside, not from the outside. So the sort of command and control or carrot and stick, those are external motivators. They are suboptimal. We want to deal with people's optimal motivators, and the optimal motivators are going to come from them having a say and a sense of ownership of the team and where it's going. And in that sense, build up a shared leadership and a shared ownership that with lots of clarity and lots of influence.
Wow. Yeah, that is so different from many of the incentives that we often see, isn't it? It's not a bonus, it's not a corner office, it's not an extra perk, a longer holiday, special lunchroom facilities. It's really about something much more internal. There is so much that this ripples into realization for people. And you have worked with so many different leaders from different environments. As you say, not every leader is a leader by position, but very often by their mission in what they're doing. Our podcast is about visionaries, and many of these visionaries are the kinds of leaders that might not have a title, but they have a big, big vision, a big dream. Would you like to tell us more about the kind of work that you have done with the leaders around the world? I know it's over 90 countries and thousands of leaders.
Yeah, so I have been working specifically with leaders now for some, I think, 18 years, 19 years this year. And the whole idea has been, irrespective of how senior they are, I've worked with sort of junior supervisors and team leaders to executives, leaders of leaders of leaders of leaders. So it's been quite a range. And right across the board, it's all about growing influence. It's all about connecting with themselves, connecting with people. And yes, as you say, I've worked with leaders now from more than 90 countries. And that's been an ongoing journey where it's broadened out. And some of that has been virtual, some of it, a lot of it has been face-to-face. And it's all about connecting with people. And one of the things I've noticed is how many people, even at a senior level, have a victim mindset. You know, I'm not going to do this for my people until somebody, my boss does it for me. And this is senior level people I'm talking about, not juniors. You know, I've had similar experiences, you know, blaming the government, blaming their own staff for their failures of leadership. And that again is that victim mindset. And so one of the biggest areas that I've worked with these leaders is the opposite of the victim mindset, the sense of ownership, the sense of accepting, of claiming their responsibility. You know, Nelson Mandela didn't wait until the government, which was the ruling authority and controlling authority of the day, changed before he started to lead. He started to lead and influence around that. And that is the mark of a great leader, is that the leader isn't waiting for something else. The leader is the initiator. The leader is the one who brings change. And that is part of that mindset that we work with so much.
Right. That really helps to put it in perspective. And the leadership work that you have done, I know it's spanned continents and so many different kinds of leaders, but I wonder, Ian, if you have a story of the kind of impact that conscious leadership has had for one of the leaders that you have mentored. And I know there are many.
I can
pick a good one.
So, wow. I mean, I could talk about so many, but let's go with Mandla. I think there's probably a great story that I can tell. So, Mandla approached me some nearly 20 years ago now, and struggled with this victim mindset. He had fathered a child. He wasn't being given access to the child, and he felt his rights were being violated. And he came to me to say, what could he do? How could he handle this? And I remember sitting with him and saying, wow, you know, I hear you. This is a tough story. And we really connected over it and we discussed it. And then I said to him, so tell me, how do you view the correlation between rights and responsibilities? And he said, what do you mean? And I said, well, do you think you have rights of access to this child if you've not taken any responsibilities? He said, what does that mean? I said, well, what have you provided? And he said, well, but he's penniless. He doesn't have anything. And in those days, he didn't have anything. And so he sort of struggled with this. And I said, well, here's a bit of a challenge. Until you have the ability to take responsibility here, maybe you don't have rights. And he was a bit shocked and shaken, but really appreciated and was very open to the challenge. And sure enough, it didn't take more than a few weeks. And he somehow scraped the money to send a blanket. And it was sort of autumn getting towards winter. And he did this. And so it then grew. He managed to get himself onto an internship as he finished his studies, and he then provided more. And that young man is now just finished his matric. He just finished his schooling, his high school. And then I look at where Mandla has now gone. He's established his own business. He has, you know, it's sort of, I think, 70 or 80 technical people in the field, senior people in the field. And so the business has grown, and he has a real vision for taking good business, good technology without compromising values into the world. And the business is just growing and expanding. And it came back to that little level of consciousness of get out of the victim mindset and get into what can I do, and let that be a foundation to build on.
I love that story because it brings together the parenting role. It was almost through this parenting responsibility that he awakened to what was possible for him, that it was providing the impetus for his reason to actually go and succeed in his career, and then succeed in business and as a leader of enterprise. Because that purpose, I believe, is also a very big element of what you share with leaders as almost their guiding light. Would you like to tell us more about purpose and conscious leadership?
Well, I think the starting point of that is actually in many ways genius. And I think what leaders need to be aware of is where are their greatest strengths? And one of the fallacies is that we think a strength is something I do well. But the reality is the strength is something that makes me feel strong. It's at a much deeper level, because excellence is not the ultimate in conscious leadership. In fact, we still put that as the unconscious leadership mechanism. Genius is the ultimate in conscious leadership. And so a leader who is conscious of their own leadership. They're conscious of themselves. They're conscious of their own genius. And what they realize is they are unique. Every single one of us in the world is unique. And if we want to make a difference, we need to be clear on what our purpose is. And we need to know what that is. And I say purpose actually is a bit singular, but it's probably purposes, because you could simultaneously, like Mandla, have a purpose to be a parent and a purpose to be a business leader. And in fact, even within there, there may be multiple purposes, but it's built out of what I call our essence, the core of who we are. That core of who we are provides us with purpose. It provides us with genius. It provides us with motivation. It provides us with vision. And so this calling on the discovering who we really are in our deepest part, our essence, that is the core of discovering purpose, of discovering vision, of discovering how and where we want to influence the world. It's discovering our why. And when we discover our why, that gives an empowerment and a motivation that is sustainable, that is not going to run dry.
I've got goosebumps, and this gets better because the work that you share has also to do not only with the leader finding their own purpose, but working with a team's purposes. How does that fit together?
Yeah, the job of the leader in a team is to facilitate the team's growth. And because ultimately, when the team is at a stage, we call it stage 4 or the performing stage, if you look at Tuckman's model. And in the performing stage, there is shared leadership. The leader is actually not that involved in every piece of leadership. Each expert in the team leads their area. And so there's a lot of shared leadership. The overall leader is still there and still has a role, but it's less and less of the sort of directing role, but more of a drawing out role. Now, for that to happen, for a team to grow through various stages to reach that point of ultimate performance, ultimate motivation, ultimate morale in the team, ultimate functioning, ultimate decision making. I mean, there's so much that comes out of that stage. It's the leader's job to grow it. So what's the starting point of that growth? The starting point is a common purpose. And so the leader's purpose one of the leader's purposes is to facilitate the creation of the team's purpose. And it's a facilitation role. It's not the leader's to impose. And I can tell so many stories of where I've worked with teams and people are going, no, we know what we're here for. We know what we're here for. So I say, okay, fine. Let's go around the table. Each person voice what you think we're here for. And then you hear as many people as there are, you have that many different opinions on what they're there for. And so the leader's job is to draw out and to define, to help the team to define its purpose. And that is part of the purpose of the leader.
Much more listening than telling.
And facilitating. So it's not that the leader is silent in that, but it's letting all the voices be heard so that we can reach something. And yes, there's a veto right. You can't sort of suddenly say, well, okay, we're here to design project X for client Y, and then the team decides, no, we're here to plan a trip to Hawaii. That's not the point. There's still boundaries, but it's a lot of autonomy within boundaries to allow the team to develop that purpose in a way that will satisfy the stakeholders.
So with so much to experience and explore and learn and discover and try in conscious leadership, what do you offer leaders at the moment?
So we have a very well-established range of products in what we call the Morpheus Genius camp. And that one is that is all about the inner journey of a leader, and we disrupt leaders there. We also have a growing family of products around the actual techniques in expressing that conscious leadership to people, because often people are missing the skills, or the skills that they've learned have a lot of gaps. And so even though you've been on the inner journey, there is still an upskilling, and that is the Lead Like Morpheus range, and that is a product set that is growing all the time. But a great place to start is with our leadership egg assessment, what we call the Essence Growth Gap assessment. And that one actually will give you a bit of a rating on both of those. It gives you a lot of information about where you are in your journey. And it's something that will move over time, but it kind of gives you a current state of where you are and what you probably need the most at this point in your leadership journey.
So as a visionary or as a leader, you can actually go and see how are you doing already.
Yes, and in fact, you could do it for your whole team. So you could have your whole team do it, and we can then work with the team to show where the gaps are in the team and the team's leadership. And in fact, I have a session in 2 days' time with such a leadership team where we're taking the entire leadership team of an organization through a process of discovering how they can work better together as a team to lead the organization. And so, and that comes from this egg assessment.
Oh, wow. So the egg assessment gives you a basic report, and then there is the opportunity to follow up with further almost training.
Yes, well, it would start with a lot of exploration, giving feedback on the nuances of the reports, of the combined nuances of the entire team. And then from there, actions can be determined as to what would be the best way to address it. Is this somebody who wants to go on a personal journey? Is it somebody is it maybe everybody wants to do some particular upskilling in an area, for example, team leadership or bringing out the genius in each of their people or whatever. And we have programs for all of that.
All right. So there are programs for teams, and then there are programs for individual leaders who want to begin by deeper personal growth as well.
Yes, indeed. Exactly.
Sounds like there is a lot to discover, Ian. And for visionaries who are listening today, would you like to share with us where they can find you and what is available to the public? If they want to get to know Totally Morpheus, where should they start?
One of the best ways to get hold of me and to find out more is my LinkedIn profile, which is simply Ian Hatton when you look on LinkedIn. And there you will also find access to the Leadership Egg, the free assessment that you can take there. But we also have a lot of regular offerings out there. The YouTube channel has, I think, over 150 videos of content that people can get access to for free. And then also we have a monthly intelligence update as well, which people can then get insight aspects of leadership and conscious leadership that they might want to know more about.
Fantastic. So there's plenty to explore. And since our time is limited and there is a lot to discover, I can really recommend all the materials that you offer. And the story behind Totally Morpheus and Yazi Media's League of Visionaries podcast is actually that through your videos on LinkedIn, I discovered your work and started paying attention to the message that you were sharing and finding how much relevance that had to me, where I had absolutely no title as a leader at the time, but I was in a position where my leadership was required. And I can definitely attest that the disruption is the right word, because you certainly turned all my perceptions and preconceptions about leadership on their head. But the process has meant that I have come to a point where I understand so much more. I feel so unburdened of the stereotypes about leadership. I feel completely free of having to tell people what to do, which had kept me away from leadership responsibilities. And also in places where leadership was necessary, like in my family life, in rather working with listening to them, with a conscious leadership techniques of finding a shared purpose, of finding the genius in what each person in that team, within my family team and my staff team brings, and working with that. And the result for me has been that I feel so much freer. I feel much more courageous about taking on leadership responsibilities, because I know I'm not going to have to carry everything on my back. I've always been a really shabby delegator. And this has actually taught me that it's not even delegation. It's almost really finding who can bring what excites the people, and letting them grow through that. And it's a joy instead of a burden. So that has been like so much of my journey with your work. And to say that I'm grateful is a massive understatement. So, Ian, thank you very, very much for being our very first guest, being a leader through conscious leadership here on the League of Visionaries podcast. Before we wrap up, is there any parting shot you have for visionaries who lead?
Well, a leader with a vision is a fantastic thing. What a brilliant starting place. But to really bring that vision to the world starts with self. Make yourself your number one job, and you will then grow in a way that can overflow to your people and to the people that you want to influence and the people that they will in turn influence, and it will become multi-generational. That influence that you want will spread and keep spreading if it's aligned with who you really are. People can sense authenticity. People are looking for authenticity. They are tired of fake news. They want the real thing. That real thing comes from being conscious with self in a way that nurtures that leadership to bring to others.
There we go. My number one job today is me. Ian, thank you so much for joining us on this very first episode of the Yazoo Media League of Visionaries podcast. And we are going to share all the links and more information in our descriptions on the show. Thank you so much. And may you disrupt.
Thank you. I will.
You've been listening to the League of Visionaries podcast by Yazoo Media, proudly brought to you by Totally Morpheus. Subscribe to the League of Visionaries podcast here on your favorite podcasting platform and follow Yazoo Media on LinkedIn to find out more about how you can share your visionary message with the world. This season of the League of Visionaries podcast is brought to you by Totally Morpheus, providers of conscious leadership development programs. Find out what conscious leadership development can do for you at totallymorpheus.com. And while you're there, take the Leadership Egg Assessment and discover your leadership essence growth gap.